So sometimes I love doing a bad faith, hateful reading of a really terrible book, but I have always promised myself that I wouldn't start picking the low-hanging fruit of cheesy romance books, because I think there are enough videos out there of people making fun of this genre. I think it's often not respected because it's largely read by women, and mainly because I'm not a romance reader. So what the fuck do I have to say about romance? Why would you listen to me? What I am, however, is a Wordle player. So when someone in the book club brought to my attention the fact that somebody out there wrote and published a Wordle romance, I knew that I had to read it. I could not possibly resist. So this is the one time I'm going to break my self-imposed rule of not dunking on romance. I am going to be reading this from a very biased perspective. I'm going to be picking it apart. I'm going into this with the expectation that it's not going to be a good book and that I'm not going to like it. However, I am going to try really hard not to judge the romance genre as a whole, not to judge like romance tropes within this book that obviously I'm not going to get anything out of because I'm not a typical romance reader. And I also want to say I am definitely not judging romance readers. There is absolutely a lot of schlock published in this genre, but that's true of every genre. Are you elitists out there trying to tell me that you have never once in your life picked up a beach read? You must be fucking miserable. So I won't be picking on the formula, and I also recognize that it'll be really hard for me to judge the pacing of this book from an objective standpoint because I am not very interested in romance stories. With all that being said, let's get into this because I need to talk about it. Let's just really quickly start with the cover. Like I said, I'm not judging all of romance, so we're going to skip over the corporate art of these two very boring looking white people, and we're going to go to the title. Now, I have a plethora of issues with the title. First being a 5-letter word for love. None of those words are 5 letters, so that just feels really unsatisfying. The word on this page that is 5 letters, novel, which they did not stylize with the Wordle format. And then also, in the word letter, both E's should not be yellow. That's not how Wordle works. If there's only one E in the word, there's only one E that will be yellow. The other one should have been gray. That pissed me off. What pisses me off more than anything about this is a 5-letter word for love. That is a crossword hint, not Wordle. This would be less annoying if the book didn't start by disparaging crosswords for multiple pages. The opener of this book, just between you and me, I've always found crossword puzzles condescending. And yes, I know, crossword puzzles are inanimate objects. They can't be condescending or judgmental or smug, but they totally are. So after this, she goes on and on about how crosswords suck because they're just filled with random niche trivia that no one in their right mind would ever know. And I have a problem with that because she is specifically doing the New York Times crossword puzzles. And the New York Times crossword puzzles are not random niche trivia. They absolutely have a standardized format for the hints that you can learn. And she's complaining for pages about how she goes 2 weeks trying to do the crossword every day and she never gets any better at it. And it's so crazy that people do this, that they have all of this random knowledge. That's not what the crosswords are like from the New York Times. Anyway, she tries doing crosswords because she read probably some BuzzFeed article about how they promote brain health. She can't do it and it frustrates her. And one day she just randomly decides to open up Wordle on the New York Times Games app. And this begins her love affair with Wordle. Can you imagine if this book was actually about her falling in love with like Wordle the game? That would be awesome. That would fuck so hard. So after she explains how Wordle works in depth using way too many words, as if anyone picked up this book not knowing what Wordle is, we then get some exposition about who our main character Emily is and where she's at in life. Where she's at is a dead-end job in an auto shop in a small town in PEI filled with old people, and she has no friends, no loved ones. Her parents are kind of close with her, but they're off in New Zealand with no cell service, and she's very lonely. She's got a degree in science, which she woefully regrets because she realized in her last year of university that she actually wants to work in a creative field, but the sunk cost fallacy got to her, and she finished out the science degree. Now, at 100 pages in, which, to be fair, has been like maybe 5 or 6 days in this woman's life because this gets so bogged down in the details, it'll literally be like, I sat down, I picked up my phone, I opened up the camera app, I swiped to selfie mode, I checked how I looked in the reflection. What are we doing? Anyway, it hasn't been that many days in her life. She has not shown an ounce of creativity at all. I don't think she actually has any artistic abilities or any interest in art. This is very theoretical of a dream of hers. I have not been shown one time that she currently has or has ever in her life had any artistic hobbies. I, at this point, don't think she has a creative bone in her body. But I am pretty sure that this dream of working in the nebulous arts that she has is meant to be delusion on her part. I'm pretty sure the moral here is going to be like, you can make any job your dream job. Life is what you make of it. You could be happy anywhere. I will be incredibly pissed off if she ends up working in a creative field like she dreams of doing, because she is not creative. I'll get into it more. It'll make more sense why I'm so pissed off about this. So she applies for basically any entry-level job in a creative field. She doesn't want to go back to school because she's worried about the same thing happening, of her getting most of the way into a degree, digging herself further into debt, and then realizing that she's not doing the so-called right thing. I think that this could be a really interesting aspect of her character to explore, like this uncertainty about what she wants. I'm not sure we're going to get into that, but I'm holding out hope. On wishing she had a job different from being a receptionist in an auto shop, there's a line here that I would really like to read because I thought it was absolutely hilarious. This is said as if it is some brand new insight, okay? I felt like I was trapped in a catch-22. I couldn't get a job without any experience, and I couldn't get any experience without getting a job. Girl, you are so fucking clever. No one has ever thought... Should we tell everyone? Okay, let me just really quickly give you another example of the insufferable writing in this book. That was more insufferable in the way it was framed, but the writing is so annoying, and that's why I'm primed to be really irritated by small things like that. Okay? This morning, I put in dough as my first guess. I was eating cookie dough for breakfast. Don't judge. The H was yellow, right letter, wrong place, and the rest of the letters were gray. Next, I tried pesky, inspired by the housefly buzzing at my window, which gave me a yellow P and a green Y. Then my mom called to have a chat before she and my dad go off on vacation to New Zealand, so now I'm trying to finish my puzzle at work, which might make me sound like an irresponsible employee until I tell you a little bit more about my job. Oh my god, I feel like this really encapsulates everything that I'm hating so far. Obviously, you don't know this because I read it out loud, but a lot of these little interjections are done in parentheses, which are always trying to be like funny. Like, she'll be like, whatever that is. Oh my god. I hate that she's addressing me with this very try-hard, relatable, humorous tone. It feels like she's turning towards the camera, thinking that she's being all, like, witty and smug, and then what comes out of her mouth is millennial humor from 10 years ago. Like, millennials today are past this shit. And then the last thing that's driving me up the fucking wall is how unbelievably awful her Wordle guesses are, and how many words we spend on them and on her justifications for why she put them in. This woman is so bad at Wordle. After we slog through the exposition, we get to sit with Emily at her incredibly boring job as a receptionist in this auto shop. She has 2 coworkers, they're mechanics, John and Dave. She just sits there alone all day. She rarely interacts with them. Customers rarely come in. It's a very small town. So she's sitting in there doing the Wordle. And I'm not fucking with you when I say that when she gets the Wordle right, she face palms. It is so jarring to read a book that is fundamentally set post-2021 with a humor and tone that are like 10 years before that. So she gets the Wordle, and then surprise, a customer comes in, an older woman who doesn't have an appointment, but she's worried about a noise that her car is making. And here, for the first time, we see a pattern that will continue throughout this book, which is Emily being super condescending towards older people. She literally goes, "She looks stressed, the poor thing." Ugh. Then the woman mentions that she is going to play bridge with some friends, and Emily thinks to herself, oh my god, even this 80-year-old woman has friends and I don't. Which is another first introduction to another pattern that we see in her character, which is that she's incredibly bitter and jealous about everything and only just barely managing to tamp that down. Her coworker comes in to help this woman with her car, and we get to meet John, who I honestly absolutely adore. Emily talks about how when she first started working here, she thought that her and John might hit it off. They're around the same age, he's kind of handsome, she put extra effort into her appearance and into making conversation with him, but after just a few conversations, it became very clear that this was not going to happen between them because John is not a warm or friendly person. He always answers her with no sense of obligation or interest. He is incredibly apathetic, and she sees this as rude and really frustrating. But when I'm reading it, and I think kind of how we're supposed to read it, it's fun. Like, he's not being impolite, he's just not being polite. You can see it as rude because that's what social convention dictates, but if John doesn't care about something, he doesn't care, and he doesn't feel remorse for that. He's like genuinely a liberated man. And I actually love it for him. And I love how frustrating their conversations are because he's just so free. Like, it's beautiful. It's the most fun, most interesting part of this book so far. And spoiler, this is a love story between the two of them. I think it's implied that John has something going on in his personal life. My guess is his mom is sick. I have no reason for that. I just truly believe it from the bottom of my heart. So I think, he's going to warm up to her. It's going to be revealed that he has a rich, emotional inner world. But right now, I love the way his character is, and I don't want him to change. I desperately wish that I cared what people thought about me as little as John does. I think he's a fantastic character, and he's really holding it all together for me because I cannot stand Emily. Chapter 2 begins with, since we're being honest with each other, I'll tell you another little secret. I don't really have any close friends. It's pretty embarrassing to admit it, but there you go. I want you to stop addressing me. I also want you to stop commenting on the things that you're saying. It is a waste of space, and it's totally breaking any immersion that I might feel. Another way that it pulls you out of the writing and really breaks it up to feel so stilted is that it keeps using line breaks as a way to support the humor. Like on this same page, she's talking about how she doesn't have any friends. Like she has acquaintances, she has long distance friends from university, but she doesn't have anybody who would like go for brunch dates with her or who would help her bury a body. And then she goes, okay, I've taken this to a bit of a dark place. Sorry about that. It's just insufferable. I will put this page up on the screen so you can see what the line breaks look like. It's like, oh, hard stop, stop doing that, stop it, cut it out. Okay, while we're on this, just listen to this. At this rate, I won't have anyone to hang out with when I'm retired. I'll have to get a bunch of cats, parentheses, which actually sounds quite nice. But you can't take a bunch of cats on vacation to Costa Rica now, can you? This is so derp adjacent, it causes me actually physical harm. I took psychic damage reading that. Another pattern I'm really struggling with this writing is that she'll say something and then she'll take it back in a way to be more like funny and relatable. Like here she says, I really like Roman history, or at least I really liked this podcast I listened to last week about Julius Caesar. I don't know who in this day and age is like, girl, you are so funny. That is so relatable. It's just annoying. I'm just annoyed by her just 100% of the time. During her lunch break, she does text her friends from university and their dynamic is quickly established. They have all moved on in their lives. They're 27 at this point. They're not university students anymore, but they're trying to act like that bond that they had at the time is still there, even though they're in very different stages of life. One is a mother, one is very career focused. The other one is just kind of there. Emily was never all that close with her. Emily, in every interaction, is jealous and bitter because she feels like she hasn't moved forward in her life as quickly as these friends. She does kind of hide it, but not really. Before heading home for the night, she has a brief and kind of cold, but again, not necessarily rude conversation with John, who she thinks of as her like loathed coworker. I do kind of love this like enemies to lovers, except you're not actually his enemy. He doesn't even think about you at all. The next day she wakes up and she does the Wordle. She starts with ready. And she always has a little explanation for why she's picked the word that she's picked, which is annoying, but I've decided that it would be more annoying if she was just randomly picking terrible words to start. Ready is not that bad. I think ready maybe is her best starting word yet. You will see how bad this fucking woman is at Wordle as we get more into this book. Holy shit. So she guesses ready because she's ready for the day. The R is yellow. Then she guesses price. The R is yellow and the E is now yellow. Then she's like, I'm going to do a little letter seeking guess right now. So she goes for tough, which I cannot fathom. Those letters are not good enough to waste a guess on. But just wait for the next one. It will get worse. She's so fucking bad at Wordle. She ends up figuring out that the word is Joker, and this comes to her because she's having a conversation with a guy online, like on Tinder or something, where he says that he likes The Dark Knight. The two of them set up a date. There are very few people in their age range living in this area. It's mostly old people. When she gets Joker right, she does a little spinny dance in her bedroom, and then she says, thank God, because if I had lost my 300-day streak, the only reason that I'm actually getting up in the morning, I don't know what would happen. Well, nothing will happen, I suppose, but I'll be super disappointed. Stop talking like a fucking caricature. I can't stop reading these lines out loud in a mocking tone as I'm reading. I just like, oh my God, I'm finding this character and this voice to be so absolutely grating, and I'm having so much fun hating it. She complains a little bit about the state of online dating. She talks about how her friends can't really relate to her on this point because they've all been coupled up forever, and then she talks about how they responded when she tried to complain to them about it, with her mom friend just saying, Is there a filter to show whether or not they want kids and ignoring everything else that she said? Now, I understand a huge part of this book is Emily feeling like she hasn't hit the milestones in life at the right time, but it's not just her bitterness and jealousy that is reducing this character to being just a mom. It's also the narrative doing that. And I think that's setting something up about a moral being like, go at your own pace. And also like, look, if she had had children at the time she thought she should have children, she would just, her entire personality would just be being a mom. And wouldn't that suck? Then you wouldn't get to suffer through her silly, fun little quirkiness. After talking to her friends, she's like, okay, I really got to get my life on track. So she takes out her list of dream qualities in a job. Over the course of these 2 pages, there are 4 parenthetical interjections. I'm not even going to give you the context for most of these because you don't need it to see how annoying they are. First off, actually, who am I kidding? They probably don't even notice. 2. And yes, obviously I realize the weather is not actually related to my life, but just let me have this one, okay? 3, I like having an excuse to get dressed up nicely, and not just from the waist up. And finally, I would be perfectly content with $100,000. Perfectly content? Who am I kidding? I would be thrilled so many times. You need to stop. I don't need these little interjections. It is so irritating. And here she's also back to talking about her dream of working in a creative field. Again, not a wisp of creativity shown in this character so far. This is all so theoretical to her. She doesn't even have any artist friends. John looks over her shoulder in the break room at this list of qualities that she wants in her dream job, and they have a short conversation about this because the concept of dream job does not compute to John, who thinks a job is a job. And this is an example of why I love John and every conversation that he's in. She says, "You think professional race car drivers see their work as a job?" John stares at me blankly. Yes. Even if you like what you're doing, it's still going to feel like a job sometimes. He just like won't engage with her at the same level that she's at. He's incredible. So that night she arrives for this date with the guy from Tinder, and she's late. And despite being late, she sits in her car and starts doing the Wordle. Now I'm going to go off on a little tangent here because these are some of the most despicable Wordle guesses I have ever seen in my entire life. These deserve criminal prosecution. All right. You might be thinking to yourself, hey, Wordle's a game. It's about having fun. You don't need to take it this seriously. For me, Wordle is not a game about having fun. For me, Wordle is about getting it in the least guesses possible. For Emily, different story, still not about having fun. For her, it's about keeping her 300-day streak, which I was irritated by at first because this streak genuinely runs her life. It is holding her back in life. The stakes are so high for her keeping this streak. And you're like, girl, it's a fucking Wordle streak. Like, take it down a couple notches. But then when you see how she plays this game, you realize like it makes sense that this streak is so important to her because it is an absolute miracle she has managed to keep it while being this fucking stupid. So she starts with month. That's an insane guess. I can't even get into it. Those letters are not good. It's the first guess. Some people like to mix it up for the first guess. Okay, it's forgivable. Her next guess is piled. At this point, everything is gray. So the third word that she picks is frack. Now for frack, she has 3 pieces of information. The F is yellow, the R is yellow, and the A is green. So why on earth is her 4th guess phrase, knowing that the F and the R are in the wrong spot? She's doing a guess she knows is wrong, a letter-seeking guess, and the only 2 letters that she is adding are Y and S. It actually raises my blood pressure thinking about it. That is the worst Wordle guess I've ever heard of in my entire life. She does get more information from it. The S is yellow. Tell me why the next guess she puts in is froz. Not a word, by the way, Fraws. She has put 3 letters that she knows are in the wrong spot into those wrong spots another time. On her 5th guess. You know the F, the R, and the S are not in those spots. Why do you keep putting them there? So she hasn't yet got it, but she's got to go in for this date. Throughout this entire dinner, she's thinking about the Wordle. That's partly because it's getting late and she doesn't want to lose her streak, and partly because she's just not clicking with this guy. They don't really have anything in common. He doesn't ask her any questions. It's just not a great date. So she heads home that night knowing that she's not going to see him again and still thinking about the Wordle. When her car breaks down in the middle of nowhere, she is struggling with whether or not to call a tow truck because she doesn't have money when all of a sudden a car shows up. And would you believe who was in it? But John. Here she says, I have never been so happy to see John in my life. Although, I suppose that's not saying much, since I'm not usually happy to see him at all. John has a friend with a tow truck who will tow her car back to the shop for free. Here, she thinks to herself, wait, he's kind of handsome outside of work, which is a surprise to her for no reason, because when we were first introduced to John, she said that she thought he was handsome from the get-go. While they sit in John's car waiting for the tow truck, she opens up the Wordle, partly because it's getting late and she can't get to midnight without doing the Wordle. She's like a fucking gremlin, don't feed him past midnight. And also partly because John won't engage in small talk with her. He walks her through the Wordle a little bit. He helps her out through her stupidity. Oh my god, this woman, she has 4 of 5 letters, so she starts going through all of the unused letters, trying to see if she can make a word with them, which is impossible because she's never tried to put these letters in different spots. I understand that the first letter on the keyboard is Q, and I understand that's why she starts with it, all right? But tell me why I had to sit here and watch her try to fit this Q in with all these other letters, as if a word that has an A, an F, an R, and an S was gonna have a Q in it. Could you not have maybe skipped over that one? Do you not think maybe that one wasn't going to be in the word? For her 5th guess here, she decides to put in the word affars. Still putting the S in the wrong spot. Guess number 5. John, not condescendingly, though it is deserved with this abysmal Wordle game, points out that she knows that the last 3 letters are ARF, and he starts helping her try to figure out what word could have an S in it and then end in ARF. And she puts the S in the 2nd spot and then tries out letters before the S. Does she speak English? Does she know how words work? I'm starting to question it. Finally, she figures out that the word is scarf. And then the tow truck shows up and he gets out of the car and she says, thanks for the help. And he says, no worries, I had trouble with it too. And this turns her entire world upside down because John plays Wordle. She gets home and she whispers scarf into the air and then smushes her face into her pillow. The next morning at work, there's this man who's trying to pull some insurance scam, and he rants at her for a long time about this car accident that caused this injury to his shoulder and how the person who hit him should have been sent to prison. And after he leaves, John says some people are just looking to blame all their problems on somebody else. And Emily takes this to heart and she thinks, damn, maybe that's me. So yet again, she starts rethinking her dream job and trying to really narrow it down. And her going through her list here shows you exactly how non-artistic this woman is, all right? Gallerist, gone. Just because I like wandering around art galleries doesn't mean I'd actually like working in one. Plus, I think I'd feel really bad trying to pretend it's okay to charge $50,000 for a piece of canvas with 2 blobs of paint on it. Photographer, gone. I like the idea of being a photographer, but if I'm honest, thinking about all those complicated buttons and settings on fancy cameras makes my head hurt. Web designer, gone. I don't want to sit at a computer all day. Makeup artist. Makeup artist? Was I high when I put this on the list? I can't even do my own makeup, for goodness sake. Gone. Okay, what the fuck? First of all, she has never picked up a camera, and yet photographer is on her list. Does she think that she's just going to get a job as a photographer with nothing behind her? Not only that she doesn't have any degree in the arts, she has no experience with photography whatsoever. It's also clear that she has no passion for, interest in, or understanding of art, with this very simpleton take of abstract art is stupid. Come on. She's just like, I want to work in a creative field, but I don't want to put any effort into it. It is so annoying. This character is insufferable because the 2 things in her life that she orbits around, the only things that she thinks about or talks about, Wordle and working in a creative field, she is neither good at nor willing to put in any time or effort to be better at. She has a brief conversation with John on their lunch break, which she's a little disappointed doesn't go further because she thought they had bonded the night before, until John, for the first time ever, asks her a question, makes conversation with her, and says, have you done the Wordle yet today? And she hasn't, so they do their little parallel play doing their wordling beside each other. She starts with Ouija and she explains that that's a good starting word because it gets rid of a lot of the vowels right from the start. Do you think I don't know that? I could strangle her. She spends 3 full pages going over her Wordle guesses. John leaves and she spends the rest of her lunch break thinking about being a paleontologist. Again, Pure fucking delusion. As if you just like get an internship being a paleontologist and like work your way up the ladder, as if there's no schooling involved in that career. She's also insufferable joking about this. She says, in parentheses, mind you, it's always seemed to me like it would go faster if they used larger brushes, but maybe they get paid by the hour or something. And then she says, who knows? Maybe I could discover a brand new type of dinosaur and they'd name it after me, the Emilyosaurus. Actually, no. That's stupid. They shouldn't name it that. And then John fixes up her car for free, and she finds herself a little bit disappointed when it's their coworker, Dave, who returns her keys to her because John has a family thing. Emily's in a good mood when she gets home, so she goes to visit her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Finnemore, but when she knocks on the door, the person who opens it is not her neighbor. It's her neighbor's daughter, Deborah, who is a very mean-looking woman. Deborah is here to try to convince her mother to go into a care home. And through some ridiculousness in this conversation, she ends up paying Emily to be a caretaker for Mrs. Finnemore, not like nursing duties like laundry, groceries. And Emily really wants to like do well for this woman and to make the $1,000 a month that her daughter is paying her worth it. So she plans them a little trip to the barrel making museum in town that weekend. At work the next morning, John is on a phone call and she's trying to eavesdrop while looking busy with an old receipt in front of her. And then she goes, I've just noticed it's from 2009. How the heck did this get here? The call isn't much. It seems to be with their boss, but it's showing that she has a little bit more interest in John. They do the Wordle together again at lunch. She knows the letters E and S are in there, and she does this thing that she's always doing where she's trying to get letters, which is fine. I understand some people play the game that way. But if you only knew E and S, would you put in the word crazy? Or would you think, these letters are not that good. A C, a Z, and a Y, those are your top priority. He helps her out a little because she's terrible at this game. And she says, that's twice now that you've saved my streak. If I need help over the weekend, I'm going to have to hunt you down at home. And he says, or you could just text me like a normal person. And the two of them exchange numbers. And then later when she's driving home, she realizes that she's inadvertently asked him for his phone number. And she thinks, oh my God, I hope he didn't think I was like, ... asking. Like, in a romantic way. And then she thinks, no, he would never think that. He's made it very clear there's nothing between us right from the start. We're not even acquaintances. We just have a Wordle alliance, and that's it. And I felt like this part was really trying to reiterate that this is like some sort of enemies to lovers thing. That weekend, she's at the Barrel Museum with her neighbor, and John texts her first. And he gives her like a little bit more in this conversation. He's like asking her questions like he hasn't really done in the past. She says, unless, ... maybe John is actually super talkative, but only in texts? I had a friend like that in high school. She was super shy in person, but crazy chatty in texts. Okay, who calls it in texts? Whatever. Using super twice in 2 sentences? Come on. Also, just like the vibe of this writing is so incredibly off-putting to me. She also says, maybe John and I are more than Wordle allies. Maybe we're Wordle acquaintances. Heck. Maybe even we're approaching Wordle friends. I need every author to stop using the word heck. It drives me up the fucking wall. I am like, I'm sweating. I don't know why that irritates me so much. You could say fuck, Amy. You could say fuck in the Wordle romance, please. She talks about being in a barrel museum with her elderly neighbor, and he says, oh my God, that sounds fucking miserable. And she says, no, old people are so cute. And then she goes off to find her neighbor, who's talking to her friend and telling him, hey, Emily will do your laundry. She'll do your groceries for you. And no matter how many times Emily says, no, I don't have the time for that, I don't want to do that, this woman will not take no for an answer. And she now has to take care of another old person. And I love this. I love that she has shown some consequences, that her infantilization was meant to be seen as bad and belittling in the way that it was. I love that it bit her in the ass, and I think that it was less explicit in the book than I'm making it seem in recalling it to you. In the museum, she's thinking about how actually kind of cool it is, and then she sees a sign saying volunteers needed, and they take her in as a volunteer, and this is her like making her way in the creative fields that she wants to work in. Except this is a job at a barrel making museum in small town Prince Edward Island. It's extraordinarily dull. Her first volunteer shift, no one comes in except 2 women looking for a bathroom. One of them goes to the bathroom and the other one says, actually, I'll buy a ticket. Let me walk around while my sister's in the bathroom. And she's like, I don't know if I have any Canadian cash on me. What do you call these silly little coins you use? Toonies? And Emily thinks, I bet she's American. And then she asks, hey, where are you from? And the woman says, New Jersey. And Emily's like, I knew it. Where else would this woman be from if she was not Canadian and had an accent similar enough to yours? The only option is America. What are you talking about? The boss at the museum is a woman who couldn't give less of a shit. Sorry, less of a heck. Who inherited the museum from her aunt, who was actually a barrel maker. She gets paid a salary from the Historical Society, and she does not care about this job. She sits scrolling through Facebook all day. So Emily starts thinking about ways that she could improve this place, and she starts finding some passion within herself. She has a project to focus on now. So this is where I'm at 100 pages in. It's Emily brainstorming ideas for how to make the Barrel Museum more successful and fun to volunteer at. Listen, I know I said that I was going to be wary about commenting on pace because I don't typically read romance. I think I would be more into romantic stories if I wasn't in a beautiful, perfect, loving relationship with my best friend. Sorry to all you single people out there, but nothing could really compare to that. And I don't need to live vicariously through romance. So I think that's all I could personally get out of romance if I was going to read it for fun and not to hate. But on pacing, I do want to say, I'm not finding this slow at all. And I don't think I ever will find it slow, because I'm so driven to read this by my hatred and my fury. I have never in my life read a book that had a voice as annoying as this book does, and it is making it fly by. So I'm going to go get back to reading this. I'll see you probably in another 100 pages. All right, I read more than I said I was going to. I'm now 260 pages into the Wordle romance, and I'm here to give you a little bit of an update. So Emily throws herself into this barrel making museum thing. She goes to schools and nursing homes seeing if they want to come on field trips, and then she decides she's going to plan an event. She's crowdsourcing ideas for this event from everyone around her, okay? When she talks to John about it, he'll throw away a comment like, oh, you could put flyers up at the grocery store, and she'll scoff at him and she'll think, oh my God, he's so silly. And then a second later, she'll be like, wait, maybe he has a point. 4 or 5 times this happens. She tells John that she's worried that people aren't going to come to this event, and they get into a little bit of an argument about the town that they live in. John is like, yeah, it might be boring, but I like living here. And Emily's like, don't you dream of living somewhere exciting like London or New York? And he goes, not at all. Do you? And she's like, yeah, living in a big city is my goal in life. And he says, that's crazy. I really think of you as a small town girl. And this offends her so greatly that she gets instantly snappy with him. And the way he apologizes is by putting sorry into Wordle as his first guess. It's at this point in the book where it really starts pushing the small town girl thing. It becomes central to her perception of herself that she is not a small town girl, whereas before it was more about working in a creative field. I know that over the course of this story, John is going to convince her that she shouldn't be looking for happiness outside of herself, and she can find satisfaction whether or not she lives in a big city. It's just being so explicit right now, beating me over the head with it. So it doesn't feel like when it all finally comes together and she has some epiphany about small town versus big city life that I'm going to feel satisfied reading that. There's a scene in this event planning sequence where she's at work and a younger woman, maybe older teenager, maybe young college student, comes in, and we see a pattern that is repeated in this book, both from Emily and from the narrative, which is a total disrespect for any generations other than her own. I've already talked about how she views older people, and it's the same with this younger woman. She's written to be vapid and snooty and self-obsessed, which of course characters can be, but listen to the way she talks, okay? Emily asks her about whether or not she would want to go to a museum or what she would want to see. She's trying to get information about how to get more people to come to this barrel making museum. And the woman says, well, I don't go to museums because history is so totally offensive, but I do get invited to a bunch of art exhibits, for my Insta. I have 30,000 followers. This is so irritating. And I know you're understanding it to be irritating. It's just hitting every point of the generation below me is bad and stupid and dumb. It just feels so tired and annoying to read. Yeah, the generation below you is offended by everything. Oh, they're self-obsessed, they're vain, is that right? That's what the boomers said about you. get a grip. Emily leans into tricking this girl into thinking that she's way older and more out of touch than she actually is, as if some 19-year-old is gonna believe that a 27-year-old in a year post 2021 doesn't know what Instagram is and thinks phones have too many buttons nowadays. Phones have less buttons nowadays. My phone has 3 buttons. Anyway, the girl leaves and Emily and John start talking about this exhibit that she wants to build at the museum in preparation for the event that she's planning. This is for some reason a secret. It's only alluded to up until later on, which is like, I don't give a fuck what exhibit they're building at the barrel making museum, but John agrees to help Trey, who is the museum's resident barrel maker, who Emily is becoming friends with, build this exhibit that she's conjured up in her mind. They then do the Wordle. Emily's first word choice is saver, as in John's a lifesaver for helping her and Trey build this exhibit. John's first word is pizza, as in you can pay me back with pizza. And then listen to this. We fall silent, both of us studying our phones. The S in saver is green and the E is yellow. I think of jean shorts girl and wonder if Insta is a word. Nope, not in word list. Why would you try that? Why would you try? I cannot understand guessing a word that you know is wrong if you're not just trying to find letters. Because Insta has an S, which you already know is the first letter of this word. So why, in a letter-seeking guess, are you ever putting in a word with an S? You already know. It's driving me nuts. And on top of that, she already knows the A isn't in it because she guessed A with savor and it was gray. Why 2 out of 5 letters you know you're putting in the wrong spot? Why are you doing it anyway? I cannot comprehend it. I want to scream. I need to see inside this woman's cavernous skull what is going on in there. I cannot be convinced that she even has a brain at all. How have you played Wordle for this long and you are this bad at it? It's like, I've told this story before, but there was a girl in one of my classes and she sat in front of me and she played this like bubble game where you shoot up different colored bubbles and then when you get 3 of them together, they disappear. And she played it every single class for the entire class, and not once over the course of the semester did she get even marginally better at this game. She was so terrible at it, and I would sit behind her and I would watch her shoot bubbles in like obviously the wrong spot. Like there would be a collection of yellow bubbles. She would have a yellow one. She'd just ping it off over there. Like sometimes I was convinced that she wasn't even looking at the screen and she was just seeing how long she could go randomly shooting things. That is what Emily is like with Wordle in this book. While they're doing the Wordle, she keeps smelling him. You know at this point that they both like each other. There's not really any question about it, but she's trying to convince herself that she doesn't like him. Not really for any reason. I think there are reasons that are really obvious that could have been used for why she doesn't want to like him. Like, you know, dating your coworker, famously a bad idea, but instead it's because he's not outgoing. Like, that's literally it. For like 100 pages, she's like, no, I don't like John. I couldn't like John. John? He's not talkative enough. After planning for multiple days, she finally decides to ask her boss, who's the worst woman ever, Shelley, whether or not she can actually even do this event. She has to beg and push, but Shelley agrees as long as Emily will take on all of the work and the cost of doing it. The next day, John comes over to the museum to help Trey build this exhibit, which it still will not tell you what it is. It's like so mysterious about it. She'll even say like, it looks so good. I can't wait until it's finished. Why do you think I care? Just wait until I tell you what it ends up being. Emily is finding herself having a lot of fun doing this planning. She's actually showing some sense of creativity, which thank God for that. And Shelley's terrible at managing this museum. So everyone keeps telling her, you should really be the one running this place. And she's like, thanks guys, that's really nice. But running a museum in small town PEI, that's basically the opposite of my dream job. So I have to believe this is deliberate because for the first 100 pages, it was all about working in a creative field. And now she's doing creative work and it's become all about working in a big city. I need to think that this is trying to show us that she can't be happy with anything, right? That she doesn't actually know what she wants and she'll be unsatisfied no matter what. But I also feel like this shift in focus has more to do with the fact that it's just slightly harder to sell a message of you can be happy even if you're not working in your dream field than it is to sell a message of you can be happy with small town life. You don't need to live in a big city to feel fulfilled and accomplished. Like, obviously, she's going to end up working here or in some adjacent job in this area. Like, that's the clear trajectory of this story, isn't it? She's not going to stay at the auto shop for a man. I'll be pissed off. And she's probably not going to move to a big city. I'd also be pissed off about that. She's going to realize that the dreams that she's adopted from others matter far less than her own internal state of happiness. And that is an easier story to sell if you're convincing her that small town life is okay and she doesn't need to live in a big city than if you're convincing her to work in a dead-end, unfulfilling job. That's why it switched, I think. So she's starting to really consider John as an option, but she wants someone to give her advice that would sway her away from him. Again, not really for any reason, though I feel like directly in front of her are many reasons why she should be wary about dating this man. Largely the fact that he's her coworker. But all it is like, oh my god, he's John. She asks her neighbor about her relationship with her late husband, and her neighbor says, I suppose it would have been nice if I hadn't had to ask. And then Emily's narration goes, my brow furrows thoughtfully. I think I know what she means. My university boyfriend was like that. He was always happy to do things for me if I asked him to, but he never did anything spontaneously. That feels like an unnecessary over-explanation and probably part of the reason why this book is 350 pages long. And then it goes on to say this on this same page. When someone does something for you without you having to ask, it's just really nice, isn't it? It shows that they're thinking about you even when you aren't around. Yet another moment of cutting insight from Amy James. We need to tell everyone that when someone does something for you without you asking, it's because they're thinking about you, and that's nice. Whose brain could have possibly ever come up with that incredibly, potent awareness of the human condition? Almost immediately after this conversation, John offers to pick up paper plates and cutlery for the party. And then it's the day of the event. This is mostly nothing. We learn that this exhibit that has been so deliberately kept secret from us is just some barrels attached to the back wall of the museum so that people can stand there and pose for a photo and look like they're holding up a bunch of barrels. At the party, she meets John's parents. She's thrilled that he's invited them. They talk to her in a way that makes it clear that John has spoken about her to them before, which is not like over the top, like not like he's shared everything and gushed about her, but more just a nice moment of her seeing that John thinks about her outside of work. After his parents walk away, she almost says, how did you end up as a dumb mechanic when your mom is a doctor and your dad is a business owner? But she catches herself. He knows that she's thinking it though, and they get into a little bit of an argument. He kind of just pokes fun at her for it, and she immediately hits him with the fucking, I'm sorry, I'm the worst boyfriend ever. Obviously, that's not exactly what she says because they're not dating and she's not his boyfriend. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. When someone has wronged you and instead of apologizing, they start bringing themselves down. They're so pathetic about it. And you end up needing to comfort him even though you're the one who has been wronged and there's no space for your feelings about how they have made you feel. That's exactly what she does. Otherwise, the event is very successful. It's not the biggest thing to ever happen in this town. It's not crazy, but they run out of food, they make a small profit, and it's fun. And everyone keeps telling her, hey, this is something that you're really good at. You should consider this as a career path. Someone says, I bet there are museums in Charlottetown that would love to have you. And she thinks, he's probably right. There are probably museums there looking for workers. But there are probably museums in other places looking for workers too. Places like New York and London and Paris. Places where museums span several blocks and tourists line up for hours to get in. I just don't care about this dream of hers. I know it's meant to be ridiculous. I do understand that, don't get me wrong. But I think that it just feels entirely ridiculous and unbelievable because there is truly no understanding on her end of why she wants this. There needs to be something, even if it's not reasonable. There needs to be some grasp of why this is her dream and why she has clung onto it so hard and for so long. After she gets home from the event, she applies for an MFA program in museum studies at NYU and an internship at the Met, and that is all she applies for. And then the next day when they're at work, John asks her if she's busy that night because there's a firelight festival and he's wondering if she wants to go. And she says, I go perfectly still. Did he just? No, can't be. But what else could he possibly mean? She asks him, are you asking me on a date right now? And he says, yeah, do you want to go on a date with me? And she says, no, this is impossible. You don't even like me. And he's like, what are you talking about? We've been friends for weeks. And she's like, yeah, but when I first came here, you wouldn't even look in my direction. Every time I made conversation with you, you just ignored me. He's like, yeah, I'm just not really a super chatty person. Also, I thought you were a snob. That's awesome because she is a snob. He was absolutely right about her. She thinks she's above this town. She thinks she's above everybody who lives in this town. And she gives off the energy to everyone that she's only here temporarily and she's leaving them all behind. And it's so irritating because she thinks she's above living in a town where she's only living here because of her parents' connections to people who own a beautiful house far outsized for her needs that they are renting to her for $200 a month. And she's like, I'm beyond this. Excuse me? I would also think you were a snob. You are a snob. I love that he calls her out for this. She goes, oh my God, I'm a snob. And then he needs to comfort her again, but they do agree to go on this date. During both this conversation and all of the conversations that happen after this at this festival date that they go on, I have noticed that the dialogue is feeling very, very impersonal. And maybe that is the author doing something. Maybe that's showing us how when you change your dynamic with someone that you're already familiar with, it can feel really weird, like you're putting up a facade because you don't know how to be in this new changing relationship with them, right? Like you're going from friends to on a date and like, how do you act? But I think that's a very generous reading. I think what's actually happening is that this is trying to be witty, flirty banter, and what it is incredibly awkward, clunky, impersonal, no personality, and trying very hard to be funny and failing miserably at that. In the car, she makes him say 3 facts about himself, and one of the things he says is, I'm going to my friend's wedding in Toronto this summer, which is the most obvious setup I have ever seen. It's like the book is saying, and this is going to happen later on. They go to this festival. Whatever. She meets his sister Kiara, who she thinks is very cool. Kiara is there at a booth selling handmade jewelry, and she's like, oh my God, I want to be friends with her so badly. As she's walking around, she says, yeah, I don't really buy anything. Most of it's too crafty for me. She literally doesn't even like art. This woman who for at this point 200 pages has been like, all I want to do is be a creative. It's too crafty for you at the fucking festival craft fair? Fuck off. She is driving me crazy with this. At the end of this date, the two of them kiss, and so begins the most passionless and dull love affair you will ever hear about. The next morning for the Wordle, she does likes as her first word, as in John likes me back. All gray. So tell me why, for her second guess, she would do shock, knowing that the S and the K aren't in there. It's not worth it. Why are you doing this? She does shock. I can tell you why, actually. Because she's shocked that the date went so well. And then that's all gray. And she thinks, oh, I can't keep being silly about this. I gotta get back to my regular method. Your regular method? You have no strategy in this game, Emily. If anything, this is your strategy. Just putting in random words tangentially related to your life. I get what the author is doing with like, aw, she has this cute little quirk where she's like putting in this as in that. Could you not have come up, just like thought for a little bit longer, come up with a better word than shock after putting in likes? It really feels like no effort was put into this book. Like the author didn't ever want to think for even one moment. So just the first word that came into mind, she just used. Emily, you do not have a strategy at Wordle. Don't say, let me get back to my method. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. She invites John over to her place that night to watch movies, and with how incredibly aged the humor and references are in this book, I'm surprised it doesn't literally say Netflix and chill, but that is what they do. Over the course of the movie, they get closer and closer to each other. He says, when it finishes, he says, do you want me to head home? She says, what's a 5-letter word for hell no? Is that maybe the least charismatic line ever written? You tell me. They have sex. And like I already said, it's passionless. It's not erotic or hot or thrilling or exciting. It is truly like nothing. It's vanilla, boring, heterosexual sex. What can I really expect? Weirdly enough, this is one of the only scenes in the book that is not incredibly prolonged and bogged down by details like everything else has been. It doesn't feel like there was any satisfying build-up or payoff with their first date, their first kiss, or their first time having sex. I think that this could have been more exciting if there was, maybe a little bit more passion, if there was more of like a building of sexual tension or a will they, won't they situation. Instead, it just seems like They just like each other well enough. It's very dull and frictionless. There's also this thing about her that is irritating me so much. I think specifically it was made to irritate me and my age range because I was like 14 when it was cool to be like, I'm so random. I'm just feeling so quirky today. Bacon and pizza. And that is how she acts. They're texting a little bit after this first time that they have sex, and she says, I'm going to watch A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. Don't even get me started. I know I'm weird. She says that over text to him. You're weird for watching A Knight's? Come on. Then later on, she goes, my tastes are kind of eclectic. I like to do puzzles. I like learning French, and I like Anne of Green Gables. You are so different. There's nobody like you out there in the world. That's crazy. Let me say what she would say. I can't even. She goes to John's apartment for the first time. She's surprised to see that he has fish. They have a conversation about whether or not the fish have names, and he says no, they don't have names. She's shocked by that. She says, you haven't named them? He goes, no, that one's a rasbora. A raspberry? And that's a swordtail. That tail looks nothing like a sword. And the one back there, that's a geophagus. Those are all terrible names. An example of what is meant to be flirty, silly, witty banter, but is actually just incredibly annoying. It's this sense of humor that feels so try-hard from her and then is totally falling flat. And to try really hard to be funny and then fail is just like so hard to look at for me. After all the firsts in their relationship are done, we get our first tiny little time skip. It's just a couple of weeks where things in her life are going really well. Her relationship is developing with John and also with her friends that she's met through the museum, with John's sister. Everything is good. She's planning a Canada Day event for the museum. She's having a great time. At one point, she texts her university friends and she says, hey, how did you guys know when your husband was the one? The mom friend, of course, says, well, if you're seeing a guy, you need to make sure that your family values are lined up and that you both want children. It's so flat and one-dimensional. I hate it. I hate the way this book is treating the women in it. The older women, the younger women, and her university friends. I feel like there's a lot of internalized misogyny. And there's even another example that I'll get to a little bit later on. Emily then realizes that in the last year, she's the only one who has put any effort into making conversation in this friend group. And it really hits her that these women have moved on from each other. That they wouldn't even probably be friends if they all lived in the same town. They're just at very different points in their life and they've grown apart. The next day, she goes to watch John race his car at the racetrack because he's a car guy. And she goes down with John's sister, Kiara, who she is now pretty close friends with. And they talk a little bit about knowing whether or not someone is the one because Kiara's been married for like 7 years. And she says, the way you can tell if you're going to last in a relationship with someone is if you can find happiness outside of them, if you don't depend on each other for your own happiness. Like with John, for example, he loves living in this town. He loves his job. He is happy with you, but he doesn't need you to be happy. Is that the same for you? And she starts thinking about it and she thinks like, not really, like I kind of hate it here and I want to live in a big city and work in a creative field. But she's trying to come up with a way that she could create a life here that is happy outside of only her relationship. And she is wondering whether or not they're fundamentally compatible in the long run, and she feels a little bit uneasy about it. Just before this Canada Day event that she's planning, she gets a call from Deborah, Mrs. Finnemore's daughter, who says, look at what you've done. My mom is in the hospital. She broke her hip, and when they took her in, they found that her blood pressure was extremely high. It's clear that she has not been taking her medication, which is one of the main things Deborah was paying Emily to do. Emily goes to see her in the hospital. She's sedated, like they don't talk to each other. She sees her looking very frail and thin and like very old, looking like someone who maybe shouldn't have been living on her own the way Emily fought for her to be able to do. And she feels riddled with guilt about it. And then the next time she goes to work at the museum, no one is manning the front desk. So she goes back to her boss, Shelley's office, and Shelley says, since everything is picking up, because Emily is putting so much work in, by the way, the Historical Society wants to pay 2 people to work here part-time manning the front desk. We don't need volunteers anymore. You're free to go. Emily fights. She's like, I want to be here in any capacity. I just love it here. Shelley's like, no, we won't need you. And she's like taking joy in kicking Emily out, right? Then a college-age student comes in to this room and it becomes very clear that this is Shelley's daughter who she has hired to work the front desk. And this girl goes, so should I like go sell tickets or something? I'm annoyed by this because there has been one other university-aged young woman in this book, and she spoke in the exact same way. This is that internalized misogyny thing coming out again. I think it shows an incredibly limited worldview to write everyone outside of your own generation in this very specific, stereotypical, and unflattering way. And it's not fun. It's not fun to read a book where all of the older people are infantilized and where the author's disdain for the younger generation seeps through onto the page like this. And that is specifically not fun because it's only really the women in the story that get this treatment. I don't want to read about that. I don't like it. I'm not warm to this character or this author because of the way she's treating anyone slightly different than herself. And in this tiny little white town, it's mostly going to be people who are different from her in terms of age. Emily does go to this Canada Day event that she planned, and to her relief and also bitterness, it all goes very well. That's the point where I'm at in the story. You know, things are kind of falling apart a little bit. I'm ready and waiting for the third act breakup. I don't really give a fuck about their relationship all that much. John is way less interesting. I mean, he still is pretty indifferent. It's not like he's totally changed now that they're dating, which is great and I really appreciate. I just don't care about them too much. I want to see what stupid message this book is going to try to deliver to me at the end, and I'm thrilled where that's going to go. So I'm going to go keep reading. I'll probably come and update you when I'm finished. I think I have a little less than 100 pages to go. So I'll see you then. I am free. I have finished reading the Wordle romance for your entertainment. Where we left off, Emily gets pretty reasonably upset. One of the only reasonable feelings she has in this whole book when the Canada Day event goes pretty well. So her and John leave early, and he's trying to make her feel better, and she's just not really in the right headspace for that. So when he says, "Don't worry, sweetheart, you'll find your dream job one day," she snaps at him, and she says, "Yeah, like you and your job?" And he goes, "Exactly." He doesn't even pick up on the fact that she's trying to start an argument. It's not just that he doesn't bite, like he doesn't even register it. She has this unchangeable belief that John has settled for the job that he's currently in, and that she knows better than he does what he wants in life, and she has this like growing resentment towards him for not having dreams as big as hers. So because he won't take the bait, she has to imagine an argument with him in her head, and even in this imagined argument, she comes off as judgmental and mean and in the wrong. Emily goes to visit Mrs. Finnemore in the hospital, and it's interesting here because Emily really likes Mrs. Finnemore. She really enjoys her company, but she's not blind to her faults. Like the other older woman that Emily takes care of, Mrs. Finnemore is very entitled and stuck in her ways. I'm pointing this out because Emily takes care of an older man, Jim, and he's literally just perfect. Like, he is simply the perfect companion. And with both of the older women in the story, even the one that Emily likes, being characterized as petty and entitled, I'm still feeling some internalized misogyny in this book. I'm noticing it, Amy. I'm not sure if you knew what you did here, but everybody else can see it, and we're all talking about it. A few days after this, she's lying in bed at John's place, and she opens up the Wordle, and she starts with the word loves, because she thinks that her and John are close to saying, "I love you" to each other. It's all gray. So then she says, "I need to rule out some other letters and figure out what vowel is in the word. Thank you." 300 pages in, explaining to me what Wordle is yet again, as if you have the intelligence to do that. The word ends up being yacht, and she's finished before John, so she swipes open her email, and in there are 2 emails, one being from NYU admissions, and the other being from the Met internship program. John sees the look on her face and can tell that something's up. He asks her what it is. She has never told him that she applied for these 2 things. To be fair, they weren't dating at the time she applied, but this does trigger a huge fight. It triggers what you might call a third act breakup initiating fight. He says, "Before you look, will you go if you get in?" And she says, "Well, it doesn't matter if I don't get in. Why don't I just look?" And he says, "It matters to me." And she tells him that she would go. And he's extremely upset. He feels like her fallback option, like the place that she's settling while she waits for a more exciting opportunity to arise. And he's angry that she's willing to throw away her entire life here for the chance of finding something better. She tells him that she has to do it, that this is her dream, and it's been her dream for as long as she can remember, which, what are you talking about? It is a significant part of your character that you went to school thinking you were doing the right thing, getting a Bachelor of Science, and that it was wrong. What do you mean museum sciences, the thing that only ever came to you like 3 weeks ago, has been your dream for as long as you can remember. What are you talking about? In this argument, he's trying to convince her that she's happy here, and she's trying to convince him that he's unhappy here. They both have this extreme unearned confidence that they know what is better for the other person. She says, I guess what you're saying is that we're breaking up either way. And he says, yeah, I guess that is what I'm saying. And she opens up the emails, and she has been accepted to both. I need to be annoyed about this for a second because you're telling me that with zero relevant experience other than interning at a museum in small town PEI for around 3 weeks, she's getting accepted into NYU and a Met internship? Are you expecting me to believe that those things would not be remotely competitive? I cannot get over this. So the two of them are done. She reads the emails thoroughly and she realizes that she actually wasn't the first choice for the Met internship, and she's taking the place of someone who dropped out, and she needs to be in New York for a week. So she uproots her entire life. She quits her job and she gets yelled at by her boss, who says he has half a mind to sell this place so he doesn't have to keep dealing with these flighty women. She tells her parents' friends that she's moving out of their house, and they say, we were planning on selling it anyway. We'll just pop it on the market. And this breaks her heart because she had kind of always imagined living in this house with John. And she abandons her caretaking jobs for the 3 old people that she was taking care of, and she is just miserable. And oh my God, I know this is a terrible thing to say, but I prefer her miserable. I should not think that, let alone vocalize it. And yet when she is in such a bad place, her voice becomes so much less annoying because she's not trying to be fun or quirky or cute or funny anymore. She breaks the news to Kiara and she tells her that it's not just that John doesn't understand why she's leaving, it's that he doesn't understand why she thinks he is settling. Because apparently your belief that your partner of a few weeks isn't happy in the life that he's been living for many years is enough to break up with him. Because you would know better, right? Because you're so sure about your own life. On her last night in the town, John shows up at her doorstep with a sweater she left at his place, and he says, okay, well, bye, I guess. And then he just stands there. And she's like, okay, bye. And then he says, actually, you're right. I do have a dream job, and I am settling. My dream job is to own the auto shop and turn it into like a vintage car repair shop. She invites him in for one last rendezvous. They watch Anne of Green Gables, because of course they do, and then they boink, and then at 5:15 her alarm goes off so she can wake up and catch her flight, and she does leave. She's crying the whole time. She's devastated to leave him behind. She's questioning her decision, but she goes. The first Wordle that she does upon arriving in New York, the answer is error. And of course she sees this as fate. And we're just going to move on from that because I need to complain about a mistake in this book. Before she guesses error, she guesses order. And she says the first R is green and the second R is yellow. Well, no. Both R's would be green if the answer was error. Did no one who knows what Wordle is read this book? Does the author have any experience with Wordle outside of playing it a couple of times? Because I'm starting to believe that nobody who touched this book before publication knew what they were doing. In New York, she both is and isn't happy. You know, New York is not all she had idealized it to be. It's stinky. It's loud, there's always sirens going off, but it's also thrilling and exciting and so much bigger than her life was in this small town. With her internship, she's nervous and she feels like an imposter, which honestly she should. I don't know how she got this position, but overall she really likes working at the Met. It's thrilling to think about what she could do with her life. It's thrilling to be in such a different position than she has been before. And she enjoys the curation and research aspects of museum studies. But the whole time, she can't stop thinking about what she left behind and wondering if she made the right decision. She'll think to herself, damn, I miss those people that I worked for. And then she'll go, no, there's no space for them in this new life. If you cared about them so much, you could call them. Like, does everything need to be this incredibly, strictly black and white? Her thinking patterns are so immature. It's endlessly frustrating to read about. In New York, she actually becomes kind of like obsessed with old people. She keeps thinking about how much she misses talking to those cute little things. Aww. It's only when she strikes up a conversation with an older woman on the street that she realizes how much is missing in her life without those cute, innocent, adorable, itty-bitty little old people that she used to talk to. So for her first project at the Met, she tries to pitch this idea of an exhibit of a bunch of old people in booths, like talking about their lives in the city. And the person who she's working under is like, yeah, this is a great idea. This is an exhibit that I would go visit. But at the Met, we kind of more focus on sculpture and painting. And there's an implication here that, like, look at how elitist these big city people are. When throughout the whole book, Emily has been the elitist in her small town. She's been the one, thinking she's above everybody else. She gets a text from Kiara telling her that John had bought the auto shop like he told her he dreamed of doing, and she's like, oh my god, look at him actually like making moves and chasing his dreams. Then a little while later, there's a gala at the Met, and she has this epiphany moment where she can see her life here in New York spreading out in front of her, working at the museum with these New York friends, having a great time and being happy. But she can also see a life where she's happy, happier even than the New York life, in this small town with John, working in this museum or working as a caregiver. She can just see herself there, and she's like, that's the choice I have to make. There are many lives that I could live and be happy in, but I have to just choose one, and that's the one I want to choose. So she pulls out of everything, and with nothing, no job, none of the money that she put into her fucking move to New York, no housing, she goes back to this small town. And here she decides to make a living as a home carer. She hires a graphic designer to make a flyer for her. She hangs it up everywhere. She's even looking for employees before she has any clients. And of course, one of the first things she does is show back up at John's door. But when she knocks, nobody answers. And as she turns around to leave, she runs into his mom, who's coming to feed his fish. Because as she tells Emily, John is at that wedding in Toronto. Emily asks her to please not tell him that she's back. She says she wants to talk to him herself, and his mom, who really likes her, easily agrees to this. This is all right. I'm okay with it, with Emily being in this town and figuring out how to live here happily without John. It is really making an effort not to be a story of a woman who is giving up her dreams to be with a man, and I appreciate that. So in the week before John's return, Emily throws herself into making this caregiving business a thing. She's trying to find employees and clients. She's hoping to do more of the organizational aspect of it, which is good because she truly has no caregiving experience, and she's so condescending to old people. She runs into Kiara, who is so excited to see her. She says, I'm sorry I didn't text you and tell you I was coming back. I just knew you couldn't keep a secret, and I don't want John to hear that I'm back secondhand. They get coffee, it's sweet, and then she heads over to the Barrel Museum. She goes in to visit Trey, but while she's there, she's overhearing a conversation between Shelley and the women from the Historical Society, and Shelley is talking about Jim. Jim was the old man that she used to take care of. He died. That was like really important, but I honestly just don't give a fuck. He has died recently. It was a significant thing that happened in the book. Sorry. Jim worked here as well as a security guard, and him and Shelley hated each other, and she tried to fire him many times, but he just kept showing back up to work because he was really just a volunteer. And Shelley is talking to these Historical Society women about how much she loved Jim, about how maybe everybody should get paid leave to deal with Jim's death, how he was the best, and he brought such a light to this. And Emily, who is kind of grieving Jim's death, runs into the room and she starts yelling at Shelley. She starts saying, that's bullshit. You're lying. This is the worst scene in the book. This is the most theatrically dramatic, corny, ridiculous, unbelievable thing that happens in this awful book. Emily is standing here yelling at Shelley, getting into everything wrong that she's done. And Shelley is like, Emily, this is very unprofessional. Maybe we should talk about this privately. And Emily's like, no, they need to hear this. You're terrible at this job and you take advantage of everybody. She's like, why don't you tell them who planned all the events and who is the reason why this museum is doing so well recently? And Shelley's like, well, it was a team effort. And Emily's like, yeah, was it? What was the brand of soda that we had at the Canada Day event? Who was the caterer? What was the prize for the scavenger hunt? And Shelley obviously can't answer any of those questions. And she starts getting flustered. And Emily says, you can't answer because you don't care about this place. And all you do is sit in your office and scroll through Facebook all day. And they're paying you to do it. And then Trey appears in the doorway and he agrees with Emily. And he says, if you don't fire Shelley, I will resign immediately. Shelley's like, well, you don't know how special I am. I have another job offer. And the Historical Society women, they're like, well, maybe you should take it. Emily, when can you start? And then you can see here Amy James has a moment of clarity and self-awareness where she realizes, oh, this is ridiculous. Oh, this would not happen in real life. So she says the Historical Society women, they have to say, you're going to still have to apply for the job. You'll have to do an interview, but we would love to have you. Obviously, she gets the job, but she still wants to do the caregiving thing. So she splits the job with Rose, Trey's wife, who she's pretty good friends with. And it's like everything has worked out perfectly, except the one final thing, which is John. She gets a text from his mom saying, actually, I was wrong. I told you the wrong dates for his trip. He got back last night. And she's like, fuck, if I go fast, I can make it to the auto shop before he leaves for the night. And so she rushes over there. And when she gets there, she sees a woman around her age getting into the passenger seat of his car. And she's devastated, thinking that he's moved on. And then she has a moment of clarity like Amy James just had with that fucking thing. And she goes, Actually, there are a million reasons why a woman might be getting into his car that don't involve him being in a relationship with her, so she chases them down in the parking lot. He gets out of the car and he's like, hey, what's up? And she's like, aren't you surprised to see me? And he goes, no, my mom told me that you came back. And so did Kira and Trey. And I'll admit it, that got me. I thought that was funny. I kind of laughed at that. He's like, hey, just because New York didn't work out for you doesn't mean that I'm happy being your second choice. And she says, New York did work out for me. I loved it there. I'm here because you're my first choice. And then he looks at her as though she's a Wordle answer that he's trying to figure out. And then they kiss. And then he says, I gotta drop the receptionist off. That's the woman in the car. Come to my place later. By the way, I bought a new house. I'll give you the address. When she shows up at this address, it's a rundown shack. And he's like, oh, I just told you this address because I didn't want you to get lost because the area is kind of confusing. And he takes her. Where do you think he takes her? To that beautiful house that she was renting. He bought his ex's house within the past 2 weeks. So basically everything in the universe is perfect. It's all tied up with a neat little bow. And the very last page, she's lying in John's arms. She's so content. She realizes that it's midnight and that she has not done the Wordle. So she has lost her Wordle streak 1 day before making it to a full year. But we get to see Emily's growth here because she accepts that she's lost her Wordle streak. She says, it's okay. We can start again tomorrow. It's a new day. And that is where the book ends. Let me just say again, because we're talking about the Wordle streak, this book gives itself a really explicit timeline, right? It starts by saying it's 304 days of the Wordle streak. And it ends at 364. So it has been 2 months. The entire book takes place over 2 months. Literally so much happens. This timeline is so fucking bungled because it has set itself very specifically as taking place over 2 months, as being a 60-day long book, but it is written like normal books that don't typically tie themselves down that tightly. So it will often be like, yeah, a couple of weeks passed by. And I'm 100% sure that if you went through this and you counted every day and every week that passed, it would be a lot longer than 60 days. And even if it wasn't, none of this could have possibly happened this fast. Even just the applications for NYU and for the Met internship program, I struggle to believe that the deadline for those applications would be a month before the program started. That's not how anything works. This is just another example of the main problem with this book, which is that no thought was ever put into this. This book is written like it's from someone who just pumps out books constantly. I can't believe this is a debut with how little care it was given. The author really did not want to hurt herself putting any effort into the Wordle guesses making any sort of sense, into writing, mildly vivid descriptions, into writing a book that is not just the most simple language of all time. It made me almost feel like she was mocking me for reading this a little bit. It felt like there was this attitude of well, I didn't care about this book that I was writing, so why should you care about it? And I guess that you do have to kind of develop an armor if you're writing the Wordle romance. Can you imagine telling your in-laws, hey, I'm writing a Wordle romance? You have to toughen up for that. But damn, it made it suck to read. It also sucked to read because this was the most irritating, self-centered, immature, and rude main character I have ever encountered. And I will say I do love to hate a narrator, and I did enjoy hating her. I think she was meant to be imperfect. I don't think I was meant to hate her this much because more than a romance, this is a finding yourself story. And how was I supposed to care about her journey if I hated her so much that I did not want good things to come to her? I've already said this, but it's really important to me to drive this point home again. The writing in this book is very cliche with a forced sense of humor that is stuck 15 years in the past, and it is so hard to square this mustache, finger tattoo, pizza is bae humor with a post-Wordle setting. It made it so much harder to read than a book written in the early 2010s would have felt using this sense of humor, because it's wow, this was aged before it was even written. I'll say what I liked. I saw some romance readers reviewing this book and saying that John is not a character. He's nothing. He literally has no personality, and he should have a stronger personality to be the male main character. And I think this point is where me not really being a romance reader makes me look a little bit more favorably onto this book because I loved John's character. I thought he was genuinely the best part of the whole book. Yeah, he's dull. He's a really boring person. And, when they got into that big fight, it felt like, who are you and what did you do with John? Like, I don't know this guy. But most of the interactions with him were the parts of this book that I enjoyed a lot. I loved his indifference. I loved his approach to interpersonal relationships. I thought he was fantastic. I will admit that this book did make me laugh a couple of times. I think because I was always anticipating a really, really terrible sense of humor that just does not mesh with my own. When it was funny, I felt it was more funny than it would have been in a better written book. Like, there's a moment where Doris, the old woman who she hates, that she takes care of, she asks her, like, hey, if you were in a nursing home, would you want to go on a field trip to a museum? And Doris says, if I was in a nursing home, I'd want to be shot. The last thing that I really need to say about this book, even though I have said it 100 times, is that you cannot write a Wordle-centered romance and have your main character be this bad at the fucking game. In that sense, it was the most frustrating book I've ever read in my entire life. That is all I have to say about a 5-letter word for love. Do not read this book unless you're a masochist. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.